YouTube. So in this video today, let's talk about weeding jobs and customers that want weeding jobs, because I hear a lot from customers where they'll say, oh, gardeners don't want to do weeding, they can say about weeding and they don't want it, and I've heard this exact thing today when I was talking to a customer. I went and did a quote for her, and it's probably the most eventful quote I've had, actually, and that's the point, not of all time, but definitely this season. Actually, this lady was very brash and very rude when she didn't need to be very rude, and I think she's getting frustrations out to me because I'm the person there, basically. So now I'll talk about my sort of stance on weeding as well, and gardening, and whether you're not a gardener unless you do weeding and all that sort of jazz. So me personally, I do weeding. I take on weeding jobs to a degree. The big thing with me is I've got to be careful. I don't want to get another hernia, and I don't want to sort of risk having another hernia or developing any problems from it. After the operation, they've told me, look, you've got to be careful. No heavy lifting, no heavy weeding. They try to apply a diagnosis, to sort of what my job is. So they say, oh well, no heavy digging, no heavy weeding. That's when I tell them I'm a gardener. And before that, I used to take on weeding when I first started, but when I started having the problems with the hernias and stuff, I just cut it right back, because I noticed a direct correlation between, if I did weeding, I was ill afterwards, because the hernia and the stoma, they didn't get along, and it was exacerbated by bending or kneeling down and all that. And trust me, I had many times where I would do lifting, weeding, pulling weeds, it's stuff like that, and then afterwards I'd be bedridden for an hour, 2 hours, or even a full day, because I had just so much problems and so much pain from the hernias. So that's why I really cut back on weeding as much as I possibly could, and even grass cuts. I gave up grass cuts because they were upstairs and I couldn't lift a mower upstairs because it would exacerbate this problem. So yeah, and for me going forward after the op, I don't want it. There's no job out there that is worth it for me to bugger myself up for X amount of money. So I do turn work away off the back of that. Now for me, I genuinely try and entertain every single quote if I can. I do try and rule them out over the phone. So at this point in time, I am very busy, and also I'm not taking on weeding, heavy weeding jobs. I went to quoted one up the other day, and the lady over the phone, she said, oh, actually, to be all fairness, she rung up for a grass cut and re-edging. So I need my lawn cutting and it needs edging. Didn't even say re-edging, just grass cut and edging. So I went there and, I'm all right doing the grass, but I need the lawns re-edging, and the borders was the lawn. It had all grown over. And so obviously a bit of a misleading quote there. I won't comment on that. So I turned the work away there and then. I says to a lady, I said, I'm ever so sorry, I says, but I'm unable to offer a quote on it. And I told her why. I said that the hernia, told her a brief sort of bit. I find it's better to be honest and upfront, opposed to just no I can't, or no I'm too busy. And that's the stance that I take. So I have, as part of my job, I think for me, I can't not do weeding. Quite a lot of my jobs involve weeding to some aspect, and in a weird sort of way, I've heard other gardeners say it's therapeutic. I actually do find it therapeutic, but on my terms. So the properties that I look after, they're very straightforward, if I'm being honest with you, and I don't mind pulling the odd weeds out, and that's it. I've broke the back of them where it is the odd weeds, or you'll get a bucket of weeds per property, because the work's been done early on. There's one job I've took on actually, and it's a raised bed and it's full of weeds. Literally, it all needs clearing out. and I find that quite satisfying, even though the thistles are like 6 foot tall and they're a pain in the arse to get out. I don't actually seem to mind that. So I've heard it heard it online, not so much from YouTube gardeners, but online definitely, Facebook groups. You're not a proper gardener unless you do weeding. Well, to me, a guy that just mows lawns all day, I'd class him as a gardener. I wouldn't just say he's a lawn guy, I'd say, he's a gardener. Do I think you're less of a gardener if you don't do it? No, I think as long as you're earning an honest living, it doesn't matter really, does it? I know we're stretching him, he's technically not a gardener, but, well, I think if you look up the definition of a gardener, you are tending to something to maintain it for something else. And I suppose technically you are tending to a lawn to, manage it. I don't know, but for me, that's what it conjures up. I wouldn't say weeding is a money maker for me, but just as much as people when they slate, the grass cutters and the mow and goers, it's you're not a proper gardener. Well, for me, I've had it where I go and just do a mow and go, but I say, oh, who does the hedges? I do them, but I don't think I'll be able to do them this year. Would you want? Yeah, that's fine. And I've done mow and goes before where they've even turned into borders, because for me, quite often I find that a customer, they struggle to do the grass, but they can do the borders. But then when they struggle to do the borders, they'll say, oh, could you take over? And I don't mind taking over at all. For me, the weeding jobs I hate are the ones where you can just tell the customers want to pay peanuts for it by how they sort of say it over the phone and how they sort of refer to it. For me, weeding is a skilled job and it's a valued job. It's not a 2-minute job, and that's how I sort of see it. So that's my stance on weeding. As I said, medically, if I go and it's just lawns that are the borders have turned into lawns, then I won't even entertain it because it'll just bugger me up in the long term, really. So I just pass on work like that. But for me, I genuinely try and entertain every single quote if I can, and I try to visit every single quote if I can. So today's customer, she wasn't very happy, bless her. She'd rung me up earlier and she said to me, so her exact sort of words were that the garden's getting a bit too much for them and they need a hand. I says, well, could you give a sort of rough description on what needs doing, because I am very busy. I says, but depending on what needs doing, I can find time. And she says, okay, no problem. She says, well, it's the shrubs. It's just shrubs and hedges, and then other bits around the property. So she never really mentioned weeding per se. Anyway, so I told her, I says, that's no problem. I says, I'll pop to you today, because I was driving through where she lives today. I said, look, I'll pop through today and we can go from there. So I popped around to her, drove up to the property, and it's quite a big property, to be fair. There's lots of hedges, lots of shrubs, and I think for this lady, she's cut her nose off to spite her face today, unfortunately. So she went, we had a little walk around, stroked the dog, and she says, well, you can see what needs doing. And I says, yeah. Says the shrubs will need, oh no, it's this it's weeding first. And I'm thinking, well, okay, you never said weeding on the phone. And I said, well, Luke, I told her, I was upfront with her. I said, look, I have to be very careful with weeding and weeding work. And I says, I can't do any heavy digging or any heavy lifting. And I told her why. I said, I've had a hernia surgery. I says, so I've got to be very, very careful on what work I take on. I says as well, I am very busy. She says, okay, well, so you're not a proper gardener then? And I said, well, I did explain to you on the telephone. I says, but I said, I'll pop up to see you. I says, we're going through the situation now. She says, well, what sort of work have you, what sort of amount of weeding can you do for me? I says, well, and I'll be honest with you, it was how she said it, and I thought, you know what, you'd not even mentioned so much the weeding on the telephone as being your first priority. In a way, you've almost got me under here under full sort of circumstances. I know that's a bit of a stretch, but that's the impression that I got, and that's how I felt after the conversation. So I was a bit sort of peeved off with her anyway. And I just says to her, Luke, I says, for the amount of work that I can do and the amount of time I've got free, I says, it's going to draw out the process. I says, you need somebody to get, I said, if I've only got an hour free, I says, or I can only do an hour, I says, and there's a lot of weeding that needs doing, I says, by the time I've done an hour a week, that first lot I've done would have grown back by then, or would be, you know, not as noticeable. She says, well, yeah, see, I'm sick of this, I can't get a gardener. And I'm thinking to myself, well, maybe if you tell them properly what you want and not trying to sort of trick them, and then not be shitty to them when they do come to you, maybe you'll get a better response. Because that's, and like I said, and then she said again, she says, well, I'm just after, you can't get any professional gardeners to come out and do anything for you. And I looked at her, I says, well, I says, this one has. I says, this one has turned up when he said he have to do a quote for you. I says, and he's there telling you why he can't do it. I said, he's not fobbing you off over the telephone, he's not letting you down. I said, he's turned up when he says he was, and unfortunately, and I'm unable to provide a quote. I says, as for the shrubs and the hedges, I said, I did say all this to you on the telephone. I am able to do that because I can schedule that in advance. I says, I could do a full day of hedge cutting, I can do a full day of grass cutting. I said, I can't do a full day of weeding. And she says, well, she said, I'm just going to have to keep me looking then, aren't I? So maybe that's the end of that little conversation. And like I said, it did wind me up. And maybe this is, and I've noticed this a few times, I don't know if you've had this as well, that people will try and trick you into doing weeding. I don't know why. Like the lady where a few weeks ago, where she said that she needs a grass cut, and then it needs edging at the same time. And you go there, and I turned up, and the lawn was the border. It had just completely grown over. And I says to her, I said, well, I said, this isn't re-edging. I says, the borders need, oh yes, I know they need digging out. That's why I got you here. And I'm thinking, I said, do you need the grass cutting? Oh no, I can do the grass. So, I don't know. As I said, it really frustrates me. And like I said, this whole thing with this lady frustrates me. I think, the thing is, now I was tempted to say this to her, but I thought, why help her? Because she did all the things. She went on to moan about the previous gardeners, and went on to say about previous gardeners she's had, and she says, this is why I've given up with gardeners. Now, looking at her property, there's a lot of shrubs, a lot of hedges, and there's a lot of work there. And realistically, if she would have been civil, she could have said, well, look, what can we do? Because actually, the majority of it, I think, can be sorted with a strimmer, if I'm being honest with you. I'm not on about strimming weeds and borders, but, you know, once the hedges and the shrubs are done, and a bit of strimming here and there, I reckon, you know, a lot of it can be sorted quickly. But there was no way of getting round to that to this lady. So if you had it where people are sort of tricking you into coming by saying that, you know, oh, I've got loads of stuff that needs doing, lawns, shrubs and hedges, and but the first thing they want you to do is the weeding. Now, I think they'll get you to do that, then they'll drop you. I don't know, I could be wrong, but it's like earlier, it's like she said, oh, we go away a lot, so we need, you know, I says, well, who looks after the lawns? Oh, well, we'll get somebody to do that. I'm thinking, well, you've got somebody here that's turned up on time, looks semi-trustworthy. I like to think I look semi-trustworthy. So, yeah, very frustrating, but it is what it is. So, do you think people are going like that? Another thing as well is why there's the stigma out there that, you know, people, you know, gardeners don't want weeding work. I'm not saying this is from other professional gardeners, but definitely I've heard it from customers, you know, past and present, where they'll say, oh, gardeners don't want to do weeding. Well, look at what time you're ringing up realistically, you're ringing a gardener when it's peak season. So now is my busiest time, and don't get me wrong, you can't necessarily pick and choose your work sometimes, because you can't pick and choose who rings you. But you're ringing a gardener up peak season saying, hi, do you want to come and do some weeding work for me, when he knows the next day or another day or even that 10 minutes later he might get another phone call from somebody saying, oh, do you want to come and just do a little in and out mow and go for me? It's all priorities, it really is. And at the same time, the people that I've seen, like this lady today, she was very abrupt and very rude, and other people I've had where they've again shown this moaning about gardeners not doing the weeding, again they've not been the most approachable people, shall I say. And I think to myself, well, you can't get somebody when you're like that. Weeding, depending on the job, some people love it and enjoy it, some people see it as hellish. I reckon we've all got stories about weeding. I've got stories where I've got customers where they're fantastic with it. You can spend a day weeding a border and they'll pay you a day rate and they'll be over the moon. And then I've got stories where customers, you do the weeding, it looks fantastic, but first they say, oh, I didn't realise it'll take you this long. Is it going to take you, am I going to pay this much to do all of it? Well, yes, to get this result. Well, I thought it would have been done earlier. So we've all got hellish stories, haven't we, about bloody things like that, haven't we, customers? So let me know, guys, let me know what your sort of stance on weeding is. As I said, I think, to me, work is work. I'd take it on if it's right for me. Remember, my golden rules for business: job's got to be financially worth it for me, it's got to be a good fit for me and my business, and it's got to give me satisfaction. And if weeding is ticking those boxes, weeding is ticking them boxes. So have a good day, guys. Keep on gardening.